You're watching the dark secret behind painkiller use in cycling. And here's the twist. A lot of what I'm going to tell you today, a lot of what I'm going to talk about, it was totally legal. That's why a professional cyclist could openly say he used an opioid-based painkiller, Tramadol, to get through time trials. So if legality wasn't the line, what is? And who's protecting riders when pain becomes team policy? Every year cyclists line up for races where pain, it's so incredible that some people can't even get to the finish line without chemical help. And we're not talking about banned doping agents, we're talking about painkillers, many of them perfectly legal. For many riders, this isn't about cheating, it's about surviving, it's about staying in a contract, proving to their team DS that they're reliable. In a sport where pain is a currency, being able to suppress pain, it gives a competitive edge. And the culture trickles down. Amateur riders, weekend warriors, Gran Fondo enthusiasts, we all copy what we see at the top table, often without medical supervision. And the result is quiet, legal dependence that few people are willing to talk about. I remember noticing this back, it's a good few years ago, 2019. A friend of mine, I better not name him, let's call him Dan. Dan came bad off out mountain biking. He broke his ribs and he dislocated his shoulder. And he was racing again like 3 weeks later. And I remember asking him how, and he smiled. Ibuprofen, codeine, and a little bit of grit. I thought he was just hard as, but I guess not. Then I heard the same story again from a rider at a very different level. Different injuries, but the exact same pills. And the statistics confirmed it. Cycling consistently ranks among the highest sports for painkiller use. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen and diclofenac are treated like nutrition products, part of the race kit. But these drugs, they don't heal anything. They simply mute pain signals, making it easier to finish today and harder to recover tomorrow. And this didn't start recently. In the 1950s, riders joked about La Bomba. This was a cocktail of stimulants and painkillers that was designed to survive the Alps. The substances have evolved, amphetamines, cortisone, codeine, but the mindset has stayed. When the big doping scandals of the 1990s and 2000s forced cycling to clean up, the chemistry didn't just vanish overnight. It just shifted into legal grey zones. Substances that weren't banned but blurred the line between care and enhancement, they started to prevail. And that's where Tramadol enters this story. For years, Tramadol was a legal opioid in cycling. It wasn't on the World Anti-Doping Agency's prohibited list, and it wasn't banned by the UCI until 2019. Teams prescribed it to dull chronic pain, but riders internally, well, they discovered that if they took a low dose, well, that took the edge off race day discomfort without technically breaking any rule. The official line was responsible medical use, but unofficially the reality on team buses was this became routine. Tramadol, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a synthetic opioid. It's the weaker cousin of morphine that you see in like Saving Private Ryan getting given to lads who've lost a leg. It's often prescribed post-surgery to give pain relief. It can dull pain and create a mild sense of calm and euphoria. But there's also a bunch of side effects if you read the label on it. Like, I scanned the label and the ones that jumped out at me are like dizziness, nausea, drowsiness, and repeated use has been shown to lead to dependency. Those effects creep up quietly, which is why so many people underestimate Tramadol. Irish rider and former national champ, super respected rider in the peloton, Nicholas Roach, he gave one of the clearest glimpses into this world. In 2015, he gave an interview with controversial Irish journalist Paul Kimmage. And Roach said that he used Tramadol for some time trials. He emphasised it wasn't magic and he hadn't felt drowsy after it. Importantly at the time, this was completely legal. There was no rule against it. Roach wasn't sitting down here confessing to doping. He was describing standard practice inside the World Tour peloton. He was riding for Team Sky at the time. And that's precisely what makes this revealing. When a respected rider can speak casually about using an opioid for a time trial, we're not talking about to treat pain post-surgery here. We're simply talking about the pain of holding an aero position for 60 minutes. It shows how far the culture drifted. The problem wasn't rule breaking. The problem was that the rules allowed this. The legality provided cover for this. It let teams and riders believe they were on safe, ethical ground. But the physiological and psychological risks, well, they don't care about regulations. Tramadol causes dizziness, nausea, drowsiness, and dependency, we just said. Who cares about what the regulations say? Maybe this is the important part. Allowing it for so long in cycling, it shaped cycling culture. If something helps you ride through pain and it isn't banned, why not take it? Okay, let's pause for a second here, because I'm genuinely curious, because if I put myself onto that team bus in those circumstances, I'm curious what I would do in that situation. Would I take the painkillers because they're not technically against the rules? I would argue they're morally wrong. They're definitely not in the spirit of sport. Let me know in the comments below. Like, would you take them? Okay, let's jump back in to the early 2010s. The painkiller culture in cycling, it wasn't a secret at this point. It was standard operating procedure among teams. Doctors tracked dosage charts like coaches track training zones. Riders carried tablets beside gels in their back pocket. The line between medicine and performance was so blurred that even insiders struggled to tell which side of this line they were on. And for years, Tramadol, it sat right in the middle of that blurry zone. It wasn't banned, it wasn't hidden, and because it worked, it became normalised. But the side effects, they were quietly stacking up on riders. Team doctors began to notice riders getting lightheaded mid-stage, reacting a couple of seconds too slow to avoid that crash. A few riders even blacked out. On paper, they were healthy. On the road, they were a danger to themselves and everyone around them. The slow drip of incidents led to growing pressure on cycling's governing body, the UCI. In early 2019, the UCI finally drew a hard line. Tramadol was to be banned in competition. The reasoning wasn't doping, it was safety. Dizziness, drowsiness, nausea. All pretty undesirable side effects for somebody who's descending a mountain at 90 kilometers an hour, I think we'll agree. It was the end of an era. But as cycling so often proves, every ending writes a sequel. For a few seasons, the rules seemed to work. Testing tightened, teams scrubbed Tramadol from medical kits, but then in 2022, the first big test arrived. Legendary Colombian climber Nairo Quintana, twice a Grand Tour winner and one of the most respected riders in South America of all time. He finished 6th in that year's Tour de France. Weeks later, the UCI announced that 2 of his race day samples contained Tramadol. Under the new rules, that meant disqualification. Nairo Quintana denied taking Tramadol. His lawyers argued that the result was flawed. This went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They reviewed the case and they upheld the UCI's decision. Quintana lost his Tour de France result. Not banned, but erased. That distinction is important. We'll come back to that. It was the first high-profile proof that cycling's new, as they were calling it, the medicine era, that it had teeth. Yet it also revealed a deeper confusion. The drug was banned by the UCI, cycling's governing body, but not by WADA, the global anti-doping agency. So technically, Quintana hadn't broken any doping rules. Was it legal? Was it illegal? It really depended on which rule book that you opened. That contradiction summed up the sport's entire relationship with painkillers, a web of rules, grey zones and loopholes that even professionals struggle to navigate around. And while the UCI celebrated its new stance, the peloton does what the peloton always does. It adapted. Because the demand didn't vanish with the ban. The pain stayed the same. The stages stayed the same brutal length with these horrific gradients. The expectation to push through everything stayed the same. So riders and doctors looked for the next legal fix. The name that surfaced was tapentadol, a newer opioid chemically related to tramadol, but roughly 10 times stronger, and crucially legal. The Movement for Credible Cycling, MPCC, immediately raised alarms. They called this the next tramadol and urged the UCI to act before it spread like wildfire through the peloton. These bans, they move slower than the chemistry does all the time. By the time the committees debate, the bottles are already in team buses. They're getting passed around the peloton. The extent of painkiller use inside cycling teams, this has been documented in numerous official studies and investigations. This isn't speculation. Like a WADA monitoring report back in 2017 found tramadol in 4.4% of cycling samples, the highest rate of any Olympic sport, and a 2018 paper in the British Sports Journal of Medicine described how painkillers were often taken prophylactically. That means before a race even started. And Cycling's Independent Reform Commission found that teams routinely organised cortisone programs as part of race preparation. These findings reveal that pain management wasn't a secret, it was structured. It wasn't a rogue culture, this was policy. And that's what makes this story so difficult. It's not about cheaters hiding syringes, it's about a system that quietly designs around discomfort, institutionalising the belief that pain is a flaw that we can erase. Because the drugs may change, but that mindset doesn't. And the irony of all this is, the pain was never the enemy. Pain was the signal, the body's last honest voice in a sport that we've built on silence. And when you numb it long enough, I can remember vividly a December training spin. I was on the back roads, there was fog, wet leaves, potholes everywhere. I was riding on a descent, one-handed, trying to stab this tiny little mode button and praying the battery would last until the final climb of the day. You know that anxiety, the is it going to die anxiety, it totally ruins your ride. And the truth is, for years, that was normal. Every season I got into this repetitive cycle. I'd end up buying a new set of lights in the winter. Normally plastic lights, plastic brackets which would invariably snap, charging ports which would fail, and batteries that would fade. Most lights feel very disposable. They're shiny for the winter and then straight into the bin at the end of the winter, and we repeat again the following winter. That all changed when I got my first set of exposure lights. Suddenly this wasn't a consumable anymore. This was a piece of kit built to last a lifetime. That's why I'm absolutely buzzing about the fully updated exposure range. Reflex 2.0 automatically adjusts the brightness of your light. It dials it down when you're going at slower speeds on the climbs, and then it unleashes the full power of the lumens on the descent, so your hands stay where they need to be, on the bars, so you don't actually crash. There's another really cool feature. It's called reserve mode, and it kicks in when runtime hits 0. It drops to a low beam and you get another 30 minutes to get you out of trouble and get you home. USB-C charging is a total game changer to my mind. It means you can get now 70% faster charging, but importantly for me, you can top up your lights from a power bank mid-ride. So if you're doing an ultra, a bike packing trip, or you're going on an event like me at Badlands, just plug it into the power bank and away you go. No need to worry about batteries failing. Exposure isn't just another set of lights. This is the last set of lights you're ever going to need to buy. Go to exposurelights.com to check out their full range. You forget what the pain was actually trying to say. In cycling, pain has built legends. Think of those iconic shots of people suffering through pain. But each generation, if you notice, of cycling riders that come through, each generation tries to claim this moral high ground. They think they're slightly better and cast aspersions down on the previous generation. Amphetamines, well, they gave way to cortisone. Cortisone gave way to tramadol. And now it's tapentadol. It's ketoprophene. It's microdoses. The chemistry changes, the logic doesn't. Because the real problem isn't the pill. It's a system that rewards those who can suffer longest. And it punishes those who can't suffer as long. Teams don't hand out painkillers because they're reckless. They do it because the structure demands it. Sponsors expect visibility. Races expect finishes. Contracts expect results. And in that equation, pain isn't a warning. It's a variable to be managed. The human cost of all this, though, it's buried under the data. Take a second and listen to the voices. Listen to the retired riders from the previous generation. Michael Barry, David Miller. No one thinks this is a good thing. Riders retire with chronic gut issues, with damaged kidneys, with blunted emotions. Some never learn to feel normal pain again. Cycling is trying to evolve. The UCI now tests for tramadol. The MPCC pushes for stronger ethical codes. And doctors, for the first time, I've heard them talk openly about duty of care. But as long as the pressure remains to finish, to perform, to endure, the temptation will always shift shape. The next painkiller, it won't look like the last painkiller. It'll be smarter. It'll be legal. Until it isn't. The only real fix isn't chemical, it's cultural. It's deciding that pain isn't a weakness, that it's information. Because if pain builds cycling, maybe listening to it is what saves cycling. Thanks for tuning in. If you're liking this format of video, please take a second and let us know in the comments below. Do subscribe to the channel because it makes such a huge difference, and like the video because it really helps the deliverability and we want to get it out to as many people as possible. Thanks for tuning in. See you next day.